Sid. Welcome to Transform Talks. Thanks for being here.
Thanks, Maria. Appreciate inviting me to this forum. Looking forward to having a good discussion around digital transformation.
Well, that's the thing, digital transformation, so many failure rates. The failure rate is quite high. So I guess let's jump into my first question here because I think we should talk about that. So you've got a lot of experience in the supply chain industry. Do you think that a lot of companies that fail at digital transformation are perhaps maybe destined to fail before they even start? Probably because their transformations that people are proposing perhaps are maybe disconnected from ground operations, to even realize the kind of problem they're trying to solve?
I think it's not how it is. I would say is for digital transformation when we are working with a lot of our clients and customer. They have the right idea. The stakeholder has the right idea. Where it sometimes fail is the resolution of understanding of how to
Mhm.
solve the problem, right? In certain cases, some people have a very high level expectation and idea of how the problem needs to be solved. Sometimes it is very low. To give you an example, right, maybe let me start on the low level. Say suppose a company is having problem with
Mhm.
forecasting, right? So the forecasting is
Yeah.
accuracy is not good, so they will say, okay, maybe the problem is the salespeople are not forecasting on all the SKUs and all the parts. Okay, let's add that as part of the
Yeah.
digital transformation where they can forecast and all this. And as you can think about it, it is kind of destined to fail in that point because now you are asking the sales guys to go and
Right.
forecast at all levels, right? So, or you go at a very high level where they say, oh, I want better synchronization with my suppliers, and the expectations or the rules of engagement are not set. So, understanding those use cases initially, what is the economic value of it, are I would say are very paramount to a successful digital
Okay, well,
transformation.
that makes sense. I mean, I think there's a lot of work that needs to be done perhaps in the pre-implementation stage, don't you think? Once they're preparing
Yes.
to transform their organization. Do you think that that's critical for success?
Yes, I would say, one of the things is you need to have a very responsive partner because in this today's world, it's very dynamic, right? So you cannot be very rigid.
Hmm.
In the last 2 years, we have seen things change so rapidly. So someone who can quickly replan things and do, I think that is part of the pre-work needed. Or and the other thing comes to my mind is more of what is your fallback option, right? If suppose things are not going good, how do you quickly fall back to your previous position? And to that point, what is needed more is having breaking down into smaller chunks, so not create this huge transformation program, multi-generational, multi-year, but break it into very small chunks, as small as like two
Right.
weeks This is the use case I will be working for the next 2 weeks. These are the benefits, these are the users, and just making it so small so that even if you fail, it doesn't matter, you can go back to the previous
So do
step,
you think a lot of people try to
right?
bite off more than they can chew?
Yes, I think that is, layering
Hmm.
it. So a lot of companies want to go to that best in class, what is everyone wants to achieve. But in order to go there, there are steps, right? I think the steps is what a lot of times it gets missed. I think a little bit thinking of, okay, what do I need to do today? And then once I reach a certain level of stability, I move into the next level and then to the next level. I think that helps
So do you
organizations.
think perhaps maybe stakeholders that are responsible for digital transformation aren't able to clearly identify the success factors that they want?
The success factor, for digital transformation, maybe just a little bit background. Today, what is happening is with this whole digital twin concept or technology, it's the combination of people, process, data, and partners.
Hmm.
So all these come together for a successful digital transformation. So for stakeholders, so in the past it was all about I need to connect these systems and all that. But today it is more of not just the system. I need to understand how people will interact with the technology. right? How they will, it will be integrated into their process. How will data come together, right? What are the inputs, outputs? All these different things needs to be considered
Hmm.
or by the stakeholders in order for a digital transformation. So it's not just an information technology exercise, it's almost like a human to human exercise, right? You need to understand how the organization behaves, and not only organization and their partners, and then how all it needs to come together.
Well, I was just going to ask you about the human element, right? Because a lot of the digital transformation failures are down to tech adoption issues.
Mhm.
There's that's some of the biggest barriers to successful transformation. So how do you make sure that your people are actually equipped and, more importantly, willing to embrace the technology and the new processes that come with it?
Yes. So, you know, what we kind of also talk about is what we say is analog versus digital, right? It is still a digital world, but end
Yeah.
of the day, there is a person who has to make the decision, right? Who has to do something for
Hmm.
that series of actions to happen. So, what
Right.
we need to concentrate on is the people aspect of it, how they would use the technology, right? Not just putting a lot of data and information on them which they cannot process. How can we automate things and making the people, the persona very specific and building around it. And what we have seen is once you do that, and when they start using it, they can see that they can get to that end-to-end visibility. The user interface, user interaction is simpler. It's giving them benefit right now. They start, using it more and solve their problem.
So basically, we solve their problems. We try to, but you know what? I want to take a step back though, because I think sometimes there's also a business disconnect with the day to day of what, say, a person on the shop
Yes,
floor or on the ground is actually going through, and then the manager comes in and says, "Hey, I've got a new piece of tech that I want you to implement." Without really understanding what they do. Do you have any examples, for instance, of that kind of thing, and whether or not tackling the people element has helped with transformation?
the people, I will give you maybe a slightly different, example, but it's related. So we had, you know, in a company, with all these constraints, they were having a huge backlog. So the master scheduler used to go through, series of spreadsheets, which is always difficult to manage, going through trying to make a decision of what can be built,
Hmm.
right? And then a lot of time the information is there, but he was unable to process through it
Because
because
there's a lot of data.
yeah, right, lot of data, and then you just run out of time. So there was lost opportunity because the thing is, it's like if we focus about the person, and what he was saying is, if you can automate few of my workings, that will help my workload because the person can only process so much
Hmm.
information. He said if you can integrate the business rules as part of the workflow, and some of the simpler or repetitive decisions can be made by the system, then they can only look into exceptions, right? So that one was very, kind of, multiple places we have heard about
So I guess it goes back to the point that you made about the I don't know, pre work. The pre scoping work is vital. Maybe to get on the ground
that.
floor and understand what problem you're trying to solve for each individual person, and then couple that with what problem the business is trying to solve in general, right?
Yes,
And then look
correct.
at what the technology, maybe the technology then can help service those two things. That will speak to better adoption, yeah?
That will speak to better adoption. And what I mentioned earlier, right? The people, the process, the data, the partners, all coming together, how people will interact to it, how will they make decisions, all that coming together is what will be a good
Well,
recipe of digital transformation.
you use a very important term there, partners. We haven't talked
Yes.
about that. And I think, do you think, so here's two questions. Do you think
Mhm.
that a lot of organizations that are looking to implement digital transformation technology consider, truly consider their partners in all of this? That's question one. And therefore, number two, do you think that there needs to be a special kind of relationship between the partner and the organization in order to eliminate adoption issues?
Yes. So on the first one, the partner is something kind of, I would say in the
Mm-hmm.
last couple of years, it's increasing because in the past, corporations would be looking into, my tier one suppliers. But now they are thinking about tier two, tier three, where the product is
Mm-hmm.
being built, where is it sourced, how does that. So they are getting interested into. And if you think about over the years, the supply chain has also kind of segmented into every company is making a
Mm-hmm.
decision, should I make or buy, right? Should I outsource? So over the years, the vertical integration has reduced to everyone is outsourcing certain part of it. So that's how the overall, not the business has become complex, overall supply and
Mm-hmm.
value chain has become more complex. So that awareness, I would say, has improved in the last couple of years, definitely, because they have understood companies is it's not just about interacting or kind of yelling at the tier one to give me more material, but it's working with them and understanding what are the challenges downstream
Can I
from
shift
their
gears
results.
a little bit briefly to supply
So
chain control towers? Because you mentioned it a little bit before. So, are they really going to disrupt digital transformations?
so how I see is, the supply chain control towers primary objective is to provide stability and then synchronization and orchestration. These are the three fundamentals of any control tower, right? And in order to answer it, would it, disrupt? I would say it's more of an enabler.
Mm-hmm.
Because today, why these control towers are becoming more and more important is the variability in supply is, significant, and also that is adding to a lot of variability in demand.
Mm-hmm.
Managing all this through spreadsheets is becoming more and more difficult. That's why where the
Well,
breakpoints is.
I was going to say, forget difficult. It's going to be impossible. I mean,
Impossible,
I can't
right?
imagine a company in this climate that is going to hope to survive while managing
Yes,
things via multiple spreadsheets.
correct. Yeah, companies can have as much as
Yeah.
100,000 spreadsheets just to manage their business. And how it works is, you would download information from your ERP system, put it there, and then use emails and, to run the business basically. So the control towers is actually, I would say, enable the whole digital transformation because it will become more ingrained with those three elements which every company is looking for. How do I
Mm-hmm.
give a stability to my business? And you start by giving, 1 day stability, then 2 day, 3 day. You start expanding that horizon. How do I synchronize my
Mm-hmm.
demand and supply, not just within my ecosystem, but also beyond with my partners? And then the orchestration part of it, which is the whole collaboration between all these partners. So that would mean everyone is kind of working towards the same pulse,
And I think if everyone's on the same
right?
track,
So
everyone's working the same, then that way well, in reality, you're able to have a more smoother operation, and then you get more adoption and etc. I want to briefly,
and then also reduce the latency. Sorry to interrupt. I just
yeah, no, no, go for it. I agree with you. They reduce the latency. Yeah,
latency between the, in the past we have seen from a change of signal between an OEM, and we mapped out in various exercises where we saw that change in signal to the tier 1 can take up to 3 months, and sometimes to the tier 2
wow,
maybe 6 months.
right, okay.
How do you reduce that latency so that if when changes happen, I can, I know it sooner? I think that will be the whole, very important thing as part of the whole digital round.
But you know what, Sid? I think in the world that we live in today, you
Yeah,
know, with all of the disruption, crisis upon crisis upon crisis, I mean, this is not going away, right?
correct.
So, how important is it going to be to reduce those latency periods? How important is it going to be to, to have access to real-time information, to make better decisions?
It will be very important. I will give you one example of with one of the companies I've worked with. So it was very interesting. Their production department was trying to forecast what they need to build for the next month,
Right?
where and they were trying to forecast based on historical sales what they have sold in the last few years. And as you know, today the past is not the future. So they were trying to do that, but at the same time, the sales team is saying is, I have the actual order from the customer. I know exactly what needs to be built. But they were saying is I don't have a mechanism where I can quickly share that with the factory
I see.
because of these multiple systems, multiple different layers, and complexity of the business. So, if you think about it, you have the real information of what I need to build, but you're not using it, on rather, you're basing it on a forecast which is based on an historical information to run your factory.
It,
So, reducing that latency is would be very, very, very helpful to
to
businesses.
me, that's an example, perfect example of what we say when the dog, no, wait, the tail is wagging the dog, not the other way around.
Yeah.
So basically, you've got systems that impose their way of working that forces you to work outside of stuff that actually makes sense and works. So you've got your salespeople with the order forms, with information straight from the ground, and no way to actually get that to the people that need it.
Yes. Correct. So the information is there, but the mechanism to kind of share it quickly at the right resolution with the operations is not there. That is what needs to be. I think everyone is trying to build that. How can I reduce that latency, build that as part of my operating model?
So with companies that perhaps are already within a digital transformation journey, because it's an ongoing, it's not a finite journey. Digital transformation is not one of those things that I've done it once, therefore I'm done. But for companies that are in the middle of this, in a volatile environment, what advice would you have for them to ensure that they get better success rates?
I think what they need to constantly look into is, that whole things of sense and respond, right? Is that improving my ability to sense change and the ability to respond to it? So not to just make it a digital journey, but also connecting it with the
Hmm.
business, right? So a lot of times the IT structures and all those are separate from uh, the whole the business side of it. So making sure throughout this digital transformation that I am actually solving the business problem and there is economic
Mm.
value in it, right? So that will always make sure that I am in sync with my
Right.
business. So that is very important, I would say, for the company to always gauge and also do it in
Hmm.
smaller chunks, right? Rather than having a multi-year, 3, 5 year plan, it's very difficult to execute. There is a lot of complexity and
Mm.
in that, right? So if we can make it smaller chunks, that will always help to
What
execute.
is the one message? And I'm gonna make you do this in one message. Imagine. So you probably have a million messages, but I'm gonna make you. What is the one message you think you'd want to leave our listeners with?
I think it was, very similar to what I just mentioned. The message would be more on that sense
Yeah.
and respond, right? So that is very critical. I know I mentioned it in the earlier conversation too, but making sure throughout all the different things you are doing is that agility and flexibility of improving the agility and flexibility of the business with that will become the competitive edge for any business, right? So keeping that in mind and doing the digital transformations and others would be very critical.
Well, on that note, Sid, I want to thank you for being here and for sharing your views with our audience. I'm sure we'll have you again. And if anybody wants to reach you, no doubt they can find you on LinkedIn or they can contact you at your company.
Yep. Thank you, Maria, for the opportunity.
Thank you. And for those of you listening, we'll catch you soon. Thanks so much.